Drive that 30-hour van from here to Purdue University. When I tell my colleagues in conference ministry that, they tell me I'm crazy. So we already know that. Paul, I've already had an invitation for you to stay and run for the governor of either Arizona or New Mexico. So I want to say two things up front. The first is be prepared to fail and to fail often. That, by the way, is not a commentary on churches that are vulnerable right now. That's a way of saying the paradigm has shifted. And you all need to be taking the kind of risks that others are unwilling to take and accept that in taking the risks, you're going to fail. Not once, not twice, not 3 times, but probably dozens of times. And with every failure, you're going to learn something that the rest of us need also to learn. And the second thing I want to say before I begin is to remind you that in our founding documents that we presented to General Synod in 1965, placing the argument before them that we deserved, with only 25 churches at that time, to be an independent conference, we wrote that given our size and potency, our gift to the United Church of Christ will be the gift of experimentation.
Hear, hear.
If you really want to know why I am so proud to serve as your conference minister, it's that you continue to live out that promise that you made to the General Synod almost 50 years ago every day. You are risk takers. And I can't tell you what an honor it is to lead a group of people who are willing to take risks that in this time few others are willing to take. I was in Chicago this week at the consultation. Paul shudders every time I say that word. And I met with a group of tall, steepled pastors. And we were having a discussion about the state of the church as we know it. Now that includes both the United Church of Christ, but also the wider church as well. And we're all aware that the church is living through an incredibly painful and difficult time. And we were there to think strategically about what options lay before us that, if chosen, might present a bright and hopeful future for us. David Rui, the pastor at Plymouth Congregational Church in Des Moines, Iowa, shared with the group that we all need to realize that the church has 3 major tasks in this time and through this time: grieving, believing, and perceiving. And as I talk about the state of the Southwest Conference, I want to borrow those words from David Rui and talk about what we can expect in the coming years. Grieving. My brothers and sisters, there is and will remain for some time plenty to grieve about. In May of 2010, we held a service at First Congregational in Tucson, Arizona, just a few miles north of here, and at the end of the service closed their doors. There was grieving. They will not be, in the coming years, the last of our churches to go through that pain and that grief and that anguish. I have been meeting over the 4 years that I've been here with leaders from our congregations, many of whom are wondering how they're going to continue to pay their pastor, how they're going to continue to keep up the building and its expenses, and with each passing year are debating how many years they have left, looking at their reserves, with which they can afford to continue to be a church. Some of our pastors have already lost their jobs. Others of our pastors have had their salaries cut in half, or have lost benefits that up until this time they've taken for granted. Churches transitioning through times of pastoral leadership are asking serious questions about how much of a pastor they can continue to afford in the future. Everyone who sits with me and asks those questions is already grieving. And all of those who look with eyes to the future are telling us that this pattern is going to continue. You heard Gordon yesterday talk about the number of churches that have been foreclosed in the last couple of years. Those numbers are only going to escalate. Those who do the deep research on this are saying that this is nothing short of a second Reformation taking place in our time. That the model and the structure and the way of being church that has fed the missional life of the church for the last 500 years can no longer sustain the mission in the coming years. That as we move into post-modernity, those who are coming behind us, whose faith will be kept alive by the movement of the Holy Spirit, will not look to the structures and the institutions and the ways of being church that we know in order to feed their missional zeal. And fewer and fewer and fewer of them are going to cross the thresholds of our doors and find their worship and missional life sustained in our sanctuaries. Which means that more and more of our churches over time are going to be closing their doors. And there will be grief. And there will be pain. And so grieving is a part of what we know we will be undertaking in the coming years. I want you to know before I close this and move on to believing that I don't fear that. Because what I trust more than anything is the power and the movement of God's Holy Spirit, who has not in this time abandoned any of us. And if you want to go to camp for only one reason, go to witness the ways in which the faith is alive in the hearts and souls and minds of our youth and young adults. And regardless of what's going on in your church right now, you will walk away with certitude, believing that the Spirit has called forth another generation to sustain the missional life of the church. Which is why our second calling in this time is believing. Already, our single-minded focus needs to shift from answering questions like, how do we preserve the institutional identity of the United Church of Christ? How do we preserve the institutional identity of our local church? How do we maintain a budget that allows us and affords us the opportunity to sustain a called, ordained pastor and keep a building and property? I don't mean to suggest that those are not important. They are important to the extent that they extend your missional calling as a congregation. The question we need to be asking is, how does the unique proclamation of the gospel, owned and claimed by the United Church of Christ, continue to be proclaimed in such a way that lives are transformed? That's the question we need to be asking. Our single-minded commitment needs to be to the preservation of that proclamation of the gospel. When Michael Kinnaman was asked, why do we have denominations? He said, denominations exist in order to perpetuate an aspect of the gospel that without that denominational existence would be in peril of distinction or diminishment. And claiming the core values of the United Church of Christ, of a continuing testament spoken by a still-speaking God, maintaining the core value of the United Church of Christ of an extravagant welcome that believes at its core that no matter who you are or where you are on life's journey, you are welcome here, and believing that the proclamation of those two fundamental values have the power still to change and transform lives is what we are built today to maintain. Embody the call to justice and the call to love is what we are called to maintain. And if we need our buildings and our seminary-trained, full-time ordained clergy to maintain the proclamation of that gospel, then so be it. But if there are those coming behind us who find those to be impediments to their ability to proclaim the gospel, then so be it as well. Our focus is on our fundamental belief and core values, and making sure that what we do and the resources that we steward are brought to bear to perpetuate that aspect of the gospel, which, let me tell you, brothers and sisters, without the United Church of Christ, is in danger of extinction or diminishment. Finally, we are called to perceiving, to discerning, to slowing down and stepping back and looking forward, and trusting that where the Spirit moves is where we will follow. This is tough for us. We are children of the Enlightenment at the close of the age of modernity. We want our truths to be measured. We want our truths to be tangible. We want our truths to be rationally defensible. And short of that, we find ourselves unwilling to risk. It's time to call forth the shamans among us, the spiritual directors, who have always been a part of the life of the church, but whose way of perceiving has never really been valued in the life of the church through the time of modernity and the age of the Enlightenment. But they're walking among us now, and they're seeing with new eyes. And what they see, they are willing to speak. And when they speak, we are called to listen to the voice of a still speaking God. And when they speak, we should find ourselves ever and again willing to take some risks. Be prepared to fail, and fail often. Is Jackie here? Jackie Meade Scott. She did her workshop yesterday. She's the founding pastor of Not Your Mama's Church. And she's failing right now. But she's not giving up. She's tried a number of times to quit and give up, but she can't. She feels called to take this risk, and we're watching her very closely. And she may not succeed. Jeffrey Deera. The man has been struggling to earn an income for the last 2 years. But he won't give up on his passion to build Footsteps United Church of Christ. A church way outside the box. Perceiving. I've talked about your willingness to take risks. Let me just say what risks I have witnessed just in this last year, your willingness to take. Because of your commitment to the proclamation of this gospel and its core values. We're buying a building. All of the conventional wisdom says that we shouldn't do this, although in the first year, our mortgage payment will be $10 less than our lease payment.
Yeah.
And if the piece of property that we have in Surprise, for which we already have a bid exceeding $800,000, can be completed, we can pay off the building. Even if we don't, thanks to Gordon Gillis over there with the Cornerstone Fund, our mortgage payment for the next 20 years will be fairly stable. The bid we got from our current lease agent goes up this year, in another 2 years when the lease expires, and for each year in the next 20 years, we can anticipate that. Again, already in the first year, it's $10 cheaper than our mortgage payment will be. So we can argue this is a good business decision. Even if the conference would dissolve in 5 years and go under, the loan agent would take possession of an asset that will have increased in value. This isn't about the money. This is about the vision, perceiving what's coming. See, we just didn't buy a building with offices. We bought a building with a sanctuary. This was originally built as a church in 1927. And that sanctuary remains empty and intact. And the key word there is empty. We're not putting anything in there. We are going to invite the creative minds among us to come in and use that as laboratory and play space. It's an incubator for what's coming. And we're going to say to them, what you can't do in your sanctuary because you'd rattle the cages of the trustees, what you can't do in your sanctuary because you can't take the pews out, what you can't do in your sanctuary because the organ, the stained glass windows, the pulpit, the altar, and all of the other accoutrements, you can do here. No rules. Come in here and pray and teach us how to be church in a new time, in a new age, in a new era. Our vision is for, at the very least, the Southwest Conference to become a regional center for leadership development, if not a denominational center for leadership development. Our conversation partners already include the Center for Progressive Renewal, which is looking now at the Southwest Conference as their Western satellite office. The Center for Progressive Leadership in the state of Arizona. There's a chapter in the state of Arizona. I've been cultivating a relationship with Beth Meyer, their executive director, since almost the day I arrived here. And she didn't know a thing about the United Church of Christ. But what she's come to learn has led to this. And your board knows about it and has authorized me to sign a contract with them. She got a $60,000 contract from Pepsi to train 25 or 30 young adults with progressive ideology how to be a leader and a change agent in their community. And she said to the Southwest Conference, we will give you all 25 or 30 of those slots if you can find the people to fill them.
Wow.
So on Tuesday, when I return to the office, I've been authorized by your executive board to sign that contract. We've got some work to do. If you know a youth or a young adult who is an emerging leader with a progressive ideology, we want their names. We want to teach them and train them how to market their message, how to craft their message, how to fundraise for their message, and how to be a change agent for transformation in their community. In addition to that, your board is sending me to Hartford, Connecticut, where I'm going to meet with Mel Toomey. Mel Toomey is the executive director of an internationally recognized Center for Leadership Studies. And as I was Googling leadership, because training key leaders is the key to proceeding the future, I came across this Center for Leadership Studies and noticed that they have an office for leadership and spirituality. And I thought, I wonder how long it's going to take to get their executive director on the phone. This is a company that trains multinational, multi-billion-dollar CEOs who walk away from there knowing that their company's value just increased because of what they learned about how to be a leader. Well, 10 minutes after placing the first phone call to his office, Mel called me back, and the first conversation lasted 90 minutes. I asked him this question: if you were to partner with the United Church of Christ and help us to train leaders prepared for a new paradigm, what would that look like? He was so captivated by the offer that his response to me was, I'm not going to tell you what I charge. I'm going to ask you what you can afford. And I want you to fly up here to Hartford, Connecticut with me and spend 2 days strategizing about what leadership can look like for the United Church of Christ. So I'm traveling up there on May 16th with a couple of other conference ministers, a seminary president, and a PhD student who's studying leadership. Currently reading a book called Get There Early. It's talking about 10-year shifts, and it's saying that if you want to succeed, get there early. This is the Southwest Conference getting there early. This is the Southwest Conference living out its promise to General Synod and to the United Church of Christ that given our size and potency, our gift to the denomination will be the gift of experimentation. Make no mistake, my brothers and sisters, we're going to grieve together over the next few years. But in the grieving, we will stand firm on the core values and beliefs that continue to ground us and in which the Holy Spirit continues to invest her movement. And we will do our best to perceive what is new, to imagine the new thing that God is doing, and to invite those, the shamans and the entrepreneurs and the creative thinkers, into our midst and just let them loose. I want to end where I began. I love you people. I have never been so happy as the day when I was called to serve as your conference minister. And I continue to say proudly everywhere I go that I represent the Southwest